Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Kindling the Hearthfire, a Patreon supported podcast bringing people together around the same fire. It's certainly been a bit of time since we last conversed, so I just want to ask, how is everyone doing? The last year has been difficult for all of us, and Imbolc is about the renewal and resurgence of life after a long, dark winter. It is also a time of new beginnings and the rekindling of inspiration. My personal practice reflects this in a big way, especially since I am celebrating my birthday a few days after the traditional day of Imbolc, the 2nd of February. This is a time for using the passive reflections of the last few months and actively burning away what no longer serves us and what we've realized might even actively harm those we have come to know and care for. Resolutions are a popular idea right now, and if you are of the same mind, let me tell you one of mine for this new year. I am a white, cisgendered woman, and as such, I am a privileged individual in ways that my non-white friends and acquaintances cannot claim. This year, I want to simply practice awareness of this privilege and the thoughts and beliefs that stem from it. That's it. I just want to become more aware and perhaps later use this awareness to have some difficult but necessary conversations with the non-white people in my community. Unpacking your beliefs and knowing yourself is a first step on the way to becoming the best possible version of yourself. It's foundational and it's work that needs to be done, but it doesn't need to be judgmental or abusive. I believe this can be a compassionate practice, even if some of the thoughts and beliefs are problematic at best or just hurt to look at. I'm not going to go into this with the belief that I am a horrible person who needs to be punished for every inappropriate or racist belief or thought that I happen to have or become aware of. I also don't want to ignore or enable them either. Being brutally honest but compassionate is a balancing act and difficult work, but it's something that I am resolute and resolved to do this year. It starts there. I don't know where this year will take me. I've already had my world turned on its head and lost people in places that look to me to be steadfast and sure. This last year, I've found comfort in things I never thought I would, but I think I am stronger for it. I am coming from a place of grief, and I've been shaken to my very foundations. And it's from this dark place that I am rekindling my flame and clearing the ashes from my own hearth. One foot in front of the other. That's the only way we can move forward. Now, this next section is going to be discussing some traditions during this time of year that I have taken from my own family, and some things that I have done this year that are going to be a little bit different than previous years. To start with, there's a tradition in my family, at least there was when my mother was still alive. She would make a dish of white beans for New Year's. And she told me, I can't remember her exact words, no, but something to the effect of it would bring luck into the new year. And she traditionally would use white beans. But as we are quarantined and sometimes things that would be available, generally speaking, are no longer quite as readily available, I looked into my pantry and found the only beans that I had in my pantry. And those were a bag of red beans that I had gotten from the food pantry. And I honestly didn't know how long they had been in the back of my cupboard. And bag was already opened. I tried to make some previously and it didn't turn out so awesome. But um, I had found a new trick to kind of get around the fact that these beans were very, very old and might not be able to be rehydrated and cooked properly. So the trick is basically to add a quarter of a teaspoon for every pound or 2 cups, in my case, of beans. And that's basically makes the water alkaline and actually softens up the proteins in the beans, especially if they're older beans. You still have to look at them a bit to make sure that they don't get overly soft and they don't turn into mush and turn all grainy. But it did help in my case to actually bring these beans back to life and actually come up with a wonderful dish. So other than the added baking soda, the traditional way my mother would do this, and the way that I tried to do this, and it turned out interesting. But anyway, going back to how my mother would make them, she would take the beans that she was making and she would put them in a large pot, cover them with water, and let them soak for 24 hours. The full 24 hours that she would just soak them to kind of rehydrate them and things like that. And then she would do something that she called degassing the beans. There are a couple ways you can do this, but the way that she would do it is she brought the beans to a boil and then she removed them from the heat and would let them soak again for another 4 to 8 hours. Usually 4 hours because these were generally fresh beans and 4 hours was pretty much enough to get them sorted so that they would cook and become soft in the 45 minutes that they were going to be cooking. So then she would cook them and she generally would make a soup out of them or a bean dish or something of that nature, but they would always be white beans. White beans, yeah, white navy beans. And that's pretty much the tradition that I wanted to follow this year. And I had a little bit of an adventure with it. I was going to film this so that my patrons could see me making this, but things went wrong and it ended up being a bit of an adventure. Um, I, I let the I left the beans for like 10 minutes to do something else. Like I needed to go to use the restroom or something like that. And I come back, the pot is boiling over and burning on the stove, and I basically have to take the pot, empty it in the colander, rinse off the beans, and rinse out the pot, and then figure out how to clean the stove while it's still really, really warm with sponges. And during this entire time, my housemate is sitting on his computer completely oblivious to all the chaos that's happening in the kitchen. And I find that absolutely hilarious, actually. But anyway, so eventually get the beans put back into the pot, into the water, and they've already soaked for the 24 hours that they were supposed to. So I'm just on to the degassing part. So um, I bring them to a boil. This time I'm staying with the pot so that it doesn't overdo. Um, so I boil them and then I take them off the heat like my mother would do. And the only addition to this was I was adding a teaspoon of, I actually added a whole teaspoon, which I'm not supposed to do, which you were not supposed to do because I didn't read the recipe enough. It was supposed to be a quarter of a teaspoon, but I added a whole teaspoon, but it turned out okay in the end. But I added the baking powder and left it alone after I degassed it in order to let it soak for another 4 hours. And then once I got down to the 4 hours, and it was about 9:30 p.m. by this point, so I was really, really tired at this point. I take a look at the beans, and I add some butter, I add some spring onions, and I add a bouillon cube, a beef bouillon cube, because I don't have a lot of spices in my cupboard right now, but I do have bouillon, and that includes lots of garlic, onions, and many things you would appreciate in a soup and things like that. So put that in there, and I also put a little bit of butter in there as well to give it a little bit more richness. And then I set it to cook, and it's supposed to cook for about 45 minutes until the beans are soft. And because of the addition of the baking powder, they actually softened up fairly quickly. It was only about 15-20 minutes of cooking, and they were soft. And so I took them out of the water, and the water's pretty much gone at this point. But it was a wonderful dish, and it was a bit of an adventure. Me and my housemate had some, and we had some with rice and butter and things like that, and they were really, really good. At least I thought they were really, really good. He not really a bean person, so he wasn't too enthused, but I really liked it, and also brought memories of my mother back to me, which was exciting and wonderful for this time of year. Um, So basically, that was my tradition for this time of year to make some beans as a dish to serve over the new year. It was an adventure, and I had a lot of fun, and the beans taste awesome. So I think that's a win on both sides. So that was a really neat tradition, and I hope people that are listening have their own traditions. If you want to share your traditions for this time of year, you can always email me, or since this is on Anchor, you can also record a little voice message, and that would be great to hear all your traditions for this time of year as well, and all the adventures you've had actually putting them together and enjoying them. So that's the end of this episode, and the next episode will be coming up February 28th. And it will be a little bit longer than this one, and it will also include a number of other items as well. But I hope everyone has a wonderful, if I can talk today, wonderful Imbolc, and a wonderful spring wherever you are in the world or whatever you're doing. And I hope everyone is doing well in their quarantine and all that good stuff. Next episode, we are going to be looking at just after Imbolc, and we are going to be looking at some podcasts that I have to recommend, some book reviews, and also the history portion of our podcast. So if you want to hear that next portion of the podcast, that'll be showing up, like I said earlier, the end of February, which will be the 28th this year. May you continue to pray with a good fire. Thank you.